Hello everyone and welcome to the FM show. On this week's episode, physicality. How do you keep your players in tip-top condition? When and how do you rest your players? And is it worth sending them on a round of paintballing? So, let's get started. Welcome to the FM show. I'm Tony Jameson, and joining me as always is RDF Tactics and producer Steve. But before we say hello, the Jameson Arena is still going under a little bit of renovation, so you might still hear a little bit of background noise. We've extended the stadium. It's brilliant, to be honest. It's going to look fantastic when it's done. But yes, there might be a little bit of background noise. Aaron, Steve, how are we?
I'm fine. I'm currently on a rest day myself. I went to football training last night, and yeah, I went into training full intense. I haven't played football for many months now, so I just thought, it's football. What's the worst can happen? Just go out there and play football. And yeah, got home, laid down, and just thought, ooh, tomorrow is rest day for sure.
Do you, before and after, Aaron, do your stretches, do that sort of stuff before any that sort of?
Yeah, so yesterday, I did my stretches, but I'm a goalkeeper, so what tends to happen in football training, they don't really care about the goalkeepers. So it will be shooting drills for me. It's very good, but then it's like a break after that. Whilst the outfield players are kind of doing their thing, I'm just walking around, drinking my water and Lucozade before I'm called up again for their next training drill. So it's a bit like stop, start. I actually got injured saving a shot with my foot. I felt it at the time, but it was just sort of a knee tweak, and it was fine until you actually completely stop playing football and it kind of like starts swelling up. And now, yeah, I can't quite bend it at the moment.
So you're officially orange injured. It's not ideal, mate. We're going to have to either send you to physio or give you some sort of cortisone injection to get you through this podcast episode.
Yeah, I am hoping it's sort of a natural fitness. I'm hoping it's my sort of body rather than an actual injury. So I'm just hoping it's my body just in shock at the moment, and hopefully it kind of calms down during the day as I move it along a bit.
Steve, this doesn't sound healthy, does it?
No, we should make absolutely clear this is not recommended medical advice in terms of how to do this. That sounds exactly like the sort of stop-start thing that you're describing. It sounds exactly how you get a muscle injury or some sort of ligament injury.
Yeah.
So I think the advice would be to anyone watching would be get that sorted out. Don't follow Aaron's current method.
If you're a goalkeeper, if anyone's unsure, we are not trained medical professionals. Just put that out there right now. Like, you might think, hey, these guys know what's going on. No, we don't. We definitely don't.
No.
It was training for a Saturday league team as well, people. So just put that out there.
At the very least, go to the NHS Choices website and have a look at or just go to your doctor if it is an issue. Or a professional physiotherapist.
Steve, are you injured?
No, I'm actually surprisingly not. No, I have had as I've sort of entered my 30s, however many years ago that was, I have found the sort of injuries more forthcoming, but I'm doing all right in terms of like working my way up from a groin injury I got in the summer playing seven-a-side and running a bit more and that sort of thing. And so, the stretches and the sort of, I've got one of those rollers, the sort of cylinder.
Oh yeah,
that you see in. I don't know if you're like myself, who sometimes likes to look at training videos or pictures that you various football clubs do, and they've got those sort of muscle rollers, and that, so use one of those as well, which is really good too. I really recommend that. So, but you do need to do a lot to sort of prepare for exercise, don't you? Like the sort of stretching before and then recovery afterwards.
You guys are talking about this in your 30s. I'm 43, right? Like, come on, I've got to try and like stretch before I get out of bed. So this is like, but I've got the foam roller, which I can't really say in my accent. I've got a foam roller. I've also got one of those deep tissue massage guns. You need to get one of them.
What?
You need to get one of them.
I try. My body can't handle that. I'm way too ticklish for it. It's just a moment it goes into the back of my leg. I'm just there. I can't sit still. I'm fiddling apart.
We have gone off on a tangent early in the episode right now. But if your physios at your club don't have deep tissue massage guns, they are doing your players a disservice. Honestly, because I do a lot of weightlifting and stuff, so like my shoulders need to they get a lot of knots in, and obviously the top of my neck and lower part of the back and that. You get in there or get in your quads and your hips, just because it's obviously the tissue starts to absorb a bit of gunk and stuff. If you're not into massage and muscle therapy at this point, you might want to skip on a little bit in the episode. But under your shoulder blades, you get that gun right up there, and honestly, game changer. Absolute game
you can
changer.
do that to yourself. You can sort of
hold it. I can do it to myself. Yeah, I can get into certain positions, but there is occasionally there's some moments when
just
Mrs.
right
J
in that YouTube censorship curve here, Tony.
There is moment when Mrs. J will be like, right, and then into goes to drilling. We refer to it as, and it's great. Honestly, you need to get one of those. Get yourself a massage gun. If you take anything from today's episode, none of this Football Manager stuff, literally look after yourselves, everyone.
And that's specific to like muscle weight training exercise rather than more cardio stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can use it for anything, but it's just because obviously there's the build up, of course, throughout your life. And as I say, I'm getting in an age now where I have to take a little bit more care of myself.
Do you know what's unexpected as well? That tangent is wholly relevant to what we're actually going to talk about in today's show.
It really is. It really is.
It's very rare the tangents are on track, isn't it? It's not even a tangent. It's just like, we'll come off at the next junction, right? We're fine here.
Yeah.
We know where we're going.
Yeah.
There's been a slight diversion on the motorway, but we will still get to the same destination. So yes, we are going to talk about that. Last week, Steve, just pulling back into FM show territory. We'll talk about what we're going to talk about as we get through. But last week, we were chatting about new save ideas. We put some to you. We put some to the wider FM audience. Did any of those ideas maybe resonate with you a little bit, or?
I think not. If you're wanting to hear, am I going to leave you in Tina? The answer is no, I'm afraid.
I'm not expecting you to do it, but like, if when FM24 comes out, are you going to A, consider getting it, and B, would that mean a new save?
Well, I think number one, from as far as I understand it, I'm not sure whether these features have been confirmed yet. You can import old saves from old versions into the new FM24, as far as I understand.
We should never have told him about that.
I believe. I don't believe it goes all the way back to. So
then I've got some thinking to do then. But what was interesting? So that was, if you haven't watched the previous episode, go back down the audio feed to listen. Obviously, not watch, and obviously on YouTube, if you're watching, then it's under the video section on the channel. And we were talking about Build a Nation, we were talking about Journeyman, restoring the reputation of a fallen giant, that sort of thing. And I realized that elements of that were already kind of in there. They're sort of in a way are kind of restoring the fallen giant element, kind of. But Build a Nation was interesting in terms of like the youth development element is something that gets harder when you're challenging for titles and stuff. You become a lot more results orientated. But the idea of getting younger Italian players through is something I've been trying to do anyway, using the youth academy, that sort of thing. And the additional benefits of building a nation we spoke about in the last episode with regards to the coefficient and how that benefits too, and loaning them out to other clubs, I was quite appealing, because I'm contemplating in the coming summer a bit of a kind of shock rebuild, selling off some sort of high profile favourites, getting them off the wage bill, getting a decent amount of money for them, and then replacing them internally, because I've got quite a few promising players out on loan that space needs to be made in the squad for. So that might be what I go for. So the Build a Nation was part of it, and I think beyond that, I'm not sure I'm there in terms of a new save just yet, but I'm certainly, took stuff from it, and it was very beneficial to engage with.
Well, there you go. At least you don't have to make your decision just yet. You've still got a little bit of time, but at least it's on the table to be considered. That's all we asked, really, was consider these as options. We're certainly not saying that it has to be this way, Steve. As always, the rule is play the game however you want. That's what we think with FM. We have had a bit of feedback, by the way, from our new show. Shout out to Czar74. Now, Czar is a regular chatter in my stream, twitch.tv/Tony Jameson FM, if you're interested in coming to watch me play some Football Manager. They've given us this bit of feedback, boys. Now, what do you reckon about this? Czar says, great episode this week, by the way. My favourite so far. Thank you, Czar. Massaging our egos with that massage gun. Love it. I think it's great. The producer Steve is around all the time now. Not easy to get a podcast to run with 3 in the midfield, but you guys are a great lineup. DLF Tony pinging the ball around, producer Steve dictating tempo a little, and RDF as a Mazzala running into the space. Good job.
Yeah, I won't be running at this moment. We also received this lovely comment from Kiritorsk on YouTube. This is great, and I like career improvement. This is great. Thank you. Finally, I can listen to something productive while playing Football Manager.
Well, that is lovely to hear both of those. And what you listen to when playing Football Manager, we'll talk about in a second. However, Czar74, thank you very much. Appreciate that. I don't think this is intentional, but there are implications in that message, which are sort of not necessarily the compliment that they think they are. Okay. I think it's great that producer Steve is around all the time now. I was always here.
He means visibly around now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. You were omnipotent before, but now you are with us. Like, you walk amongst us now.
Walk amongst you, yeah. And also, dictating tempo a little. Cool. Thanks. That's
Steve just proving he can slow the game down quite easily there, just like Ram. Slow this right down.
Anyway, I realise I'm having a go at someone who's giving us a compliment. Sorry, I'm a dick. Thanks very much, Czar74. Genuinely, as you say, it's not balancing between the three of us. Not the easiest thing to for any 3 voices and getting that rhythm. And so the fact that has been noticed is massively appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, and especially as well now we're doing it live rather than in sections. So it's good. It's good that people are enjoying it, and of course Kiritorsk as well, enjoying the new format. So if you are enjoying the new format, make sure you drop us a comment and let us know what you are liking. Of course, we always say if you want to get in touch with any comments, you can either leave them on YouTube, or you can leave a comment on Spotify, or you can send us a post via social media on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. That's the FM Show Pod. That's our handles on those. Obviously, there's the Discord server as well. Come and join us. The link is in the description below. Or for longer correspondence, Steve has access to the mailbag, and the email is thefmshowpod. That's thefmshowpod @gmail.com. And of course, we are The FM Show wherever you get your podcasts. And if that's not enough, you can also support the podcast via Patreon. If you can afford to, you can sign up to become a member of the FM Show Squad, which gives you exclusive bonus content every month, early access to every weekly episode, both audio and video. We have a private Discord channel as well, and you get to watch the live show that we did at the Insomnia Gaming Festival back in Easter. In order to sign up, you can sign up from as little as £3 a month. To do so, visit patreon.com/the FM Show Pod to become a member of the squad. Now, as we said last week, we let Aaron choose, Steve. We let him bring the Tactics Garage back. He was very, very happy about that. This week, despite our little tangent at the start of the show, we've let you choose what we're going to talk about. And what is it?
We're going to talk about, I don't know whether I just woke up tired this morning or something. Maybe it's on my mind in terms of what we're going to talk about today. But we're going to talk about managing fatigue and lack of sharpness. So to be clear, this is not about injuries. If we're talking about injuries, we've gone too far. We have failed. What we're going to talk about is making sure that as best as you can, you prevent those injuries, essentially. And partly as well because I'm at the stage in my save where are we? Sort of March, April time, where the combination of like knockout football in Europe, business end of a league season, cups as well, the sort of classic period of 2 games a week on top of an already heavy season. So you need as many players available as possible, but that gets harder and harder to do. So we thought, some of this stuff will be obvious to people, stuff that you already do, but by going through the sort of various sections in the different parts of the game, we thought we'd do something with regards to that you might not have heard of before in terms of managing fatigue and that lack of sharpness. So let's start with fatigue. Like I say, it's an interplay of factors, and we'll go through all of them to sort of tessellate things. Primarily, if you're whichever FM version that you're on in your interface, if you go to squad to begin with, above your squad, you'll have the sort of drop-down menu, which gives you various ways of looking at things on your squad. So you've got general info, contract, transfer, all those sort of various things. Drop down, scroll down. If you're thinking we're going to injuries, we're not, because we've already failed if we're going to injuries. Okay? We're going to fitness. So you look at fitness, and then what comes up are some little hearts. Now, this will all be stuff that you've seen before on this interplay. You probably do know the traffic light system that the hearts go through from green through to sort of red, and how like the sort of life bar goes up and down. But just in case you haven't ever actually hovered over and looked at what overall physical condition, what the hearts reflect and mean, it's basically how much the toll of training and matches have taken on your players. And that changes at different parts of the season, different parts of the sort of post-match cycle, etc. So that condition, obviously, if you're looking at players who are a stronger level of green, full bar of health, that's great. Orange verging on red, empty heart, bad. Various reasons for that, though, and they interplay with match sharpness. So a player, and match sharpness goes through different symbols too. Where you want to be is your bright green with the thumbs up. That's, as they call it in the game, sharp. You're looking sharp. Where you don't want to be is red, thumbs down. That's, that will often be either you've banished them, they've not trained for weeks, or they're coming off a major injury and they're just getting back to running. So match sharpness sort of affects how many minutes players can play. So, for example, a player who can only manage, they'll say your physios will come back and say to you on the way back from injury, they can only do 45 minutes or so, etc. So, yeah, really have to stress that what those things are telling you are influenced by a whole bunch of things you may not have realised initially. So, like I say, we'll skip through match sharpness slightly because that's more of a question of when players are coming back from injury, and we want to avoid injury.
It's a bit like your fitness tracker, isn't it, that you wear on your wrist? Like, if in the ultimate, the simplistic sense, green means good to go. Orange means, not brilliant. Red means I need to rest it. I really need to rest it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. So that's in the squad fitness section. Those are the two things we'll be looking at. And like I say, if you've just played a match and you're looking at your players' conditions and they're all low, that is not a surprise because they've just done the most intensive part of their either half a week or weekly cycle. And another point I'll make, which overrides all of this, is that check these things at different points, post-match, on match day, probably most importantly when it comes to team selection. So whose job is it to deal with fatigue and injury prevention? If you're thinking physio, you're wrong. The most important in terms of the fatigue management, etc., are your sports scientists. So they will be looking at fatigue and that sort of stuff. So if you're looking to improve this and injury prevention is your issue, fatigue management is your issue, get the best sports scientists you can. And I'm only touching, just for the benefit of Tony and Aaron, because I know I will go down a complete rabbit hole if I am allowed to. I'm only touching on staffing, but go to that staff section, go to the medical section, look at your sports scientists. You will see medical team attributes, and sports science is your right-hand column. And you hover over, you can see how many sports scientists that you have who have 20 as sports science or below. So it's a little bit confusing because it mismatches their attributes, but every single sports science that scientist that you have, I think it's so head of sports science. I've got 3 sports scientists, head of sports science, and 2 sports scientists below them. I'll look at them and I'll go, great. So Pascal Reggiano, who's my head of sports science, has 19 sports science. That's pretty good. Vince Green Birch has 20, and then Rob Dawson has 19. So my sports scientists are pretty damn good at sports science.
Yeah.
Great. So what that means is that when you go to the medical medical center, and you have your overview, which is the first tab that you click on medical center, that's where you'll end up. You'll have your risk assessment section, and your sports scientists will be the people giving you that data. So the better your sports scientists are, the more accurate what they're telling you is. If they're terrible, then it's like, well, guesswork. So like I say, it's a player by player question, and you can tweak that. But like I say, before you go to the medical center, which seems like the obvious place to go to, those are the things you should look at first in your squad and then in your staff before going to the medical center. So risk assessment will show you various things. So depending on your version, you've got match load, training load, injury susceptibility, your fatigue, and then you see the heart again, and you see your match sharpness again. And overall risk at the end is kind of combining all those things to tell you very high or low, etc. And that does change. So Aaron, how do let's say we've got a player who's very high risk overall. What do we do to reduce it?
We've got a live show coming up on Monday, the 6th of November in Nottingham at the Canal House. It's part of the Nottingham Comedy Festival. If you're interested in coming to see the FM show live, seeing myself, seeing producer Steve, seeing RDF Tactics in person, then there's a ticket link in the description below. The tickets are priced at £5. Come and see the show. Come and hang out afterwards. We'll do a bit of a meet and greet. We'll do a bit of a chat. We'll talk FM. Bring your stories. Bring Matt Doherty if you can. But yeah, Monday the 6th of November, the Canal House in Nottingham, £5. Ticket link in the description below. Get your tickets. Come and hang out. It's going to be fantastic.
There's a couple things you can do. So if it's a first team player and he's playing a lot of games, simply just give him a rest. Give him a break. Not necessarily dropping him, but you are just resting him. But also, it can depend on your training that you've set. So, for an example, you could have a high intense tactic, but then your training could be fairly intense as well. Now, you don't necessarily have to change your training if it's not an issue with your overall squad. But if there's one or two players, it's actually it's good to check their natural fitness attribute. So, for an example, I'm looking at Benjamin White. His natural fitness is at 13. Now, in the Premier League, that is around an average attribute, 13. So if he starts to get a bit tired, looking a bit fatigued, then what I would do is go into Benjamin White's profile. So for those who are watching on YouTube, you can see it. And those listening, just go to the player's profile. And then you've got little tabs, overview, contract, transfer, development. I go to development, and this is where you can do your training. So you can train a player in a certain role, additional focus, or intensity level. Now, Benjamin White automatically will be following what I've set for the whole team, which is at the moment on double intensity. But as I said, scenario, he's actually lacking a bit of, he's feeling a bit fatigued and his natural fitness is on 13. So I'd actually be looking to drop his intensity. If it's around January, we've got a lot of games, I would actually drop it to half. But if we got a nice break, so we're playing on Saturday, next game's on Saturday again, then I'll go for normal intensity. So he's not training at the same intensity as the rest of the squad, and that just allows him to catch up a little bit physically with the rest of the squad.
And so that's training in terms of the way that you can tailor it to individual players, and one of the areas you can help manage your fatigue. We'll go back and forth between training and match day things, just kind of as they occur to us, to be completely honest with you. So in the game, substitutes.
Can I just ask one quick question before we get started here? This is with elite teams, yeah? Sports science I've heard of here, right? Remember at the start of the FM23 cycle, Steve, my physio was my left winger. What am I meant to do with... Where do I find a sports scientist?
So I guess then the thing would be in the lower level leagues, it's kind of getting you good all rounders, isn't it? And just sort of and so if you can find a physio who's got pretty decent sports science too, you kind of, I suppose in a way, when you've got fewer people that because for example, to your point, Aaron, Tony, my staff currently at Fiorentina, my medical team, has 13 people in it.
Oof.
My squad has 13 people in it. my physio, I'm not looking for his physio attribute of physiotherapy and adaptability. My physio has 7 for crossing. That's where we are.
So yeah, this is but as I've said previously, and as we'll talk about when we do a staffing section in future, putting your resources into staffing, admittedly again at the elite level, but maybe it tracks too with regards to lower down, where every pound counts, every dollar counts, every euro counts, is kind of a more efficient way. If you sort of,
I guess being an elite team, you're pretty more relaxed, right? So you're going to be trusting these staff members. You just play your game, not really keeping an eye on too much on players' physical state, and you're just kind of following what your scientists and your physio may be saying. But in those lower leagues, I'm guessing during games as well, especially during games, around the hour mark, just keep your eye on players' fitness level. And that's what I've noticed as well. When players are looking they're a bit tired around the 60th minute mark. What I also found out is that they're not always then fully fit for the next game. So I would always make sure I would try and take off those people that are, even they're not necessarily have to be tired, but if they're showing early signs of being tired. So what I've noticed sometimes my centre backs, they could be one with their heart fairly full and the other one is almost at half. To me, that's an early sign that centre back is getting a bit tired out there. And he might not necessarily be tired right now, but we are preventing that fatigue, I guess. And then I can just take him off. But obviously, it depends on the game state as well. If you're drawing 1-1, you might not want to be taking off your centre back that's winning every single header. But again, if you've got that luxury, you're 3-0 up or 2-0 up even, it's a 60th minute mark. One of your centre back is noticeably more tired than the other. Just take him off and give him a little bit of a rest. And that way you are preventing fatigue as well.
Again, that is, of course, a luxury at the higher levels where you can rotate your squad, you can bring fresh legs on. Obviously, it's not always going to be, even at the elite levels, you're going to be in a situation where sometimes you can't afford to rotate your squad as much because, you might have a big injury list. You might have big games coming up. It might be big game. So you don't want to be resting what would be your star players all the time. And that's the thing. It's just trying to work out what is best for your club because there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all, I'm presuming.
Oh, yeah, absolutely not, especially because players are different. A lot of players are different. Some are going to be coming with a higher stamina and natural fitness than other players. Some players also have determination as well that helps you get through certain games. So it depends on the players as well. But football managers are right in that regard because then what you can do is go to certain players that you notice get a bit tired early on and you can go to you go to their player profile and then you go to the history tab and then you can create a note. Then simply just put anything you want. I mean, I will just put tired on one of my players. And then when you go back to your squad, you will notice that he has a little yellow box next to his name. Now, already you kind of got your reference, your guideline, really. When you're playing your games, these guys are going to have the yellow boxes. And it can be your sort of, okay, let me keep an eye on him because he's got the yellow box in his name. And I can just take him off in certain moments sort of thing as well.
Huh.
There's little Steve's going, oh, that's great. There's a little on your analysis report as well of a player. You can see what position they've been playing throughout the season. And I'm not going to mention that bit, right? But you can also see if they ever substituted and you can see how many minutes they start clocking.
Yeah.
So again, that's really interesting. If you see a player who's starting to fatigue, you're like, if maybe you just bought him and you're sort of integrating him into the squad and you're like, he seems to be tiring a lot. You can look and you can see where previously, if he's only been playing 60, 70, 80 minutes at a time, maybe he's not able to play that full 90 minutes at that point. So again, that's maybe a little thing just to look out for. And because obviously, as FM has evolved throughout the years from text across the screen to this big data-driven behemoth that it can be now. Steve, you mentioned there about this risk assessment. Now, fatigue, the early warning signs, risk assessment section, it's not somewhere I spend a lot of my time, I must admit. I probably should. I probably should, right? As with a lot of the parts of the game, there's areas of the game where you go, I probably should spend a little bit more time here, actually. Do you want to talk us through this risk assessment section and explain it Explain it in a way that I would understand.
I think it's a way into more detail with regards to the squad and the hearts and the thumbs that we were talking about earlier. So you go into the medical centre on the left-hand side, and at the top is risk assessment. And then as I was alluding to earlier, you've got your specific player, their current match load. Generally speaking, it's across the past 14 days. Your training load, injury susceptibility, your fatigue, and then you see the thumbs and the hearts again. And they also have, depending on the version you're using, a lovely little, sort of stick figure, which shows you whereabouts their injuries are, whether it's a hamstring or a calf, etc. Overall risk is then what you get on the far right-hand side. So at different points in a season, it helps in terms of team selection. So form might be a factor. Suitability to role might be a factor too. Like you say, Tony, early warning system with regards, I'm looking at mine now, for example. I'm in a slightly weird place in terms of the fact that I've just hit an international break. So I've got basically 2 weeks before my next fixture. But when then I'm into league game knockout, really busy period, basically to the end of the season. So now is an opportunity for me to go, okay, where are my players at? Like, how can I avoid these things? So I'm looking at my players who was at a very high injury risk. The one who's at the top is a guy called Mitchell Elliott, but he is above average susceptibility to injury, and he's had a heavy game load. So it says very high injury risk, but I know that he's a squad player. So he's just, unfortunately, that means he probably won't be a player you can rely on because he's not going to be available. So you'll know in your squad who your most important players are. So the one I'm scrolling through down and looking at is Adam Chlozek. So he scored 20 goals for me this season. He's on banging form at the moment. I could really do without losing him at all. His match sharpness is a thumbs up, and his overall risk of injury is, the heart is sort of, we played the previous day, so it's sort of high but yellow. So based on those two things, I'd be like, he's fine. However, I go in and I have a look at him, and because he's got a history of a specific injury, and I'm just navigating to find that to remind me what it is, recurring pulled ligaments that he's had through his career means where he is right now is that he needs a rest. So I've seen that. I've gone, okay, maybe I can do it over the international break. I can sort of give instructions to say he can only play 45 minutes for the Czech Republic, etc. I reduce his training, so that's a good example of going in there and looking at players and being like, oh, actually, I didn't realize that because equally just going back to his stats as well, his overall physical profile, his natural fitness is 13, stamina is 14, which is sort of average, which, as Aaron was talking about earlier, doesn't necessarily tell me that this is a guy who is poor physically naturally. So that is an example of how I've looked at it now and gone, okay, I need to keep an eye out, because if I lose him, he's quite hard to replace. So managing him a bit is just a way of not getting those emails being like, oh, he's out for 5 months. It's like, how did this happen?
And I guess the game is very much set up as risk and reward, isn't it? I know when speak to anyone who plays the game. I know Nick Madden from SI is very much, that's his catchphrase almost, risk and reward, risk and reward, risk and reward. And you are going, big game coming up, striker's not looking great, what do we do? Let's stick him on, he gets 1 goal, then he breaks his leg, and you're like, oh, everything's gone wrong. But I guess, Aaron, it's all part and parcel of football, isn't it? Sometimes you just gotta roll those dice, right?
Yeah, and when you lot were talking, I actually opened up a save, so my Dynamo save where we're in Build a Nation, and I've just been sat here just thinking, what am I? So if you walked into my team and looked at the medical center, you'd be thinking, what is going on here? But again, it's that sort of thing. So I have noticed some of my players with natural fitness, and you can see on the screen as well. For those who can't, I've got a right back here, Joanna Man, that we like to call him. His natural fitness is 5. His natural fitness is 5, but he's played 4 games in the last 2 weeks, which is quite a lot of games.
It's quite a lot of games. Fitness is 5. He's a footballer. Come on.
But he also does have a recurring tight groin, which now his overall risk is high injury risk. And when you was talking about that risk and reward, he's actually an impact sub. So is there actually any point in me to keep playing him? I'm not actually sure why I keep playing him, but yeah, that's what's going on. But there is certain players. So like we've got a striker here, Jojo, similar to similar to what your striker was as well. He's the goal scorer, but he does have some issues when it comes to fitness. And I'm in a position where I said earlier, where it gets to around 70 minutes, if we're 2-0 up, it's always about taking him off. So I always start him to make sure that I am making sure that he's a regular starter, because that's what his contract is. But I do also like to take him off. So even though it does say that he's played 4 games in the last 14 games, none of those games were actually 90 minutes, which is what I like to do for certain players as well. Just take them off. So I've risked them by keep playing them. And the reward is they might grab a goal or so or two before that 70-minute mark. And then that's when I try and balance that risk by subbing them off.
And so actually, as we just illustrated there, Aaron is sort of getting a sense of how big a problem he does or doesn't have here, which
I've got a big problem. For those who will be watching on YouTube, they're going to see a big problem here. Like, bear in mind, we have just completed a game, but there are some players that didn't play in that game, still very high injury risk. So we've got an issue here.
So we've got an issue of players who aren't playing are running the risk of injury just by being in the ground. I mean, come on, it doesn't sound safe at all, does it? Like, oh, Gaffer, I might be injured. Well, you didn't even play. Yeah, I know. Just these seats are really uncomfortable.
Come on. But the point is, if you want a more nuanced perspective than that, in terms of like you walk on the grass, you might get injured. There is a way of doing that. So another way of looking at it in terms of beyond what Aaron was talking about is if you go back to that medical center and in the overview, you'll at the top you'll see your head of sports science or an equivalent position if you don't have a sports scientist. So Tony's left winger come physio, for example. We'll talk about a percentage decrease in injuries so far compared to what they'd expect on average. So, for example, for me, it's a 72% decrease in injuries so far this season compared to what we'd expect on average. That's about 3/4 of the way through. So that is a demonstration that all the sort of things, as with every element of this game, all the things that we've done in terms of getting the top physios, sports scientists, etc., managing workloads of individual players and team training, is having an overall effect, which means that in the crucial points of the season, we've got the players available that are going to make the difference for us. And then they'll also give illustrations of like current workload training could lead to certain players. There's a line there that overall training workloads could lead to increased level of injuries, and it highlights specific players. So, for example, it's highlighted Adam Plozek for me at that moment in time being at high risk of injury. So it's another broader way of looking at, again, who might be in trouble.
And will that change based upon the time of the season as well? So you're obviously more likely to get injuries as the season builds up, but you could also get injuries at the start of the season if your pre-season's been really full on. I suppose maybe you're doing a lot of like physical work.
Yeah, and again, this is a player-by-player basis, and that's why, obviously, in the episode 2 of the new era, which you can get on the audio feed on YouTube, if you scroll down, we spoke about that pre-season thing and actually building up your, doing your strength and engagement work there, building the minutes, giving people 45 in the first game, then 60, etc., building them up gradually. That also applies when players are coming back from injury. So, this season, for example, I have had a 22% decrease compared to the sort of average. However, injuries are inevitable, and it's about mitigation. So the thing that I've got here, again, if you go to your medical center and injury history, it will see in I think it's just this season, it shows you that you're in. If you look at your severity, you've got major, moderate, minor, etc. A twist or a pull or a tight groin, etc. That's just kind of par for the course, really. It's a couple of days, etc. Not necessarily worth worrying about. But I've had a major injury to Mohamed Kudus, who's one of my cornerstone midfielders. That way back, basically their preseason starts again. I've only been able to use him sparingly because if he comes straight back from a major injury, so he had sprained knee ligaments and he was out for 5 weeks. If I then, day after he's back in training, put him in and do 90 minutes, he's probably going to re-injure himself again. So it's almost like a curve again in terms of like they've had the injury that you've got to lead it back up into them being. So injury prevention when players are in low condition because of they're coming back from injury is really important too, in terms of treating them as a special case. Because also one thing that, if you go back to your risk assessment, will tell you, your overview will tell you, is, for example, Mohamed Kudus still have areas of their game in which they haven't recaptured the best form due to those injuries. So another thing to remember too is that the player, and why it's so important to avoid these big ones, is that the player that was there before a big injury is going to take a long time to get back to the player they were afterwards. So again, to stress, it's why it's so important to have that injury prevention as opposed to getting there and having the injury.
Interesting. I'm just taking all this in because, like, you know, there is obviously there's a science behind it. Of course there is, and I know that a lot of the time you can mitigate these instances coming up because I suppose things like doing your own training will of course help because the game will set physical training mid-season, and like you're essentially bringing more risk to your players at that point. Like people, I guess, will be, you know, your star players are injured, you want to rush him back and get him in the team. It's all obvious stuff that when we're in that fog of the game, I suppose, really, and the heart takes over the head, and you're like, I know we shouldn't rush him back, but we need him. We've got to get him back in, and then he goes off. Aaron, that's the worst thing, isn't it? Right? A player who's been out for a while, you get them back in the team, and then whatever point of their return, orange injured comes up, and you're like, oh, he's gone again. I've rushed him back too soon.
I'm the worst for it as well, because you want to show the player, like I'm so big on showing the player faith. So when he comes back from injury, there's none. For me, it's not, let me just slowly put him into the team. It's like, I'm going to show faith in you by playing you right now. And then it's like, and what happens a lot for me as well, they pick up the light injury before the big one as well, which they pick up that light injury, and I'm like, should I carry on? Because it's only 20 minutes in. Should I take him off? Nah, let's carry on. And then boom, big injury, and it's like, I've just messed him up, and it's all my fault as well.
They've literally cut the plaster cast off him that morning. Go on, you can do a full 90 minutes in the Champions League. Go on, and then like 8 minutes in, Gaffer, I'm in pain. Like, yeah, you will be. Yeah.
What's also interesting, in the medical center, is that your sports scientist actually, there's a message there as well. Now, I don't actually ever read this. This is the very first time I've seen this, only because Steve was like talking about it, and I was scrolling. I was like, oh wait, you can scroll down. So the head of sports scientists will give you a message. At the top is kind of like, I note that the overall current training overload could lead to an increase, and it just gives you a load of names. Then it has like, we have seen a 67% decrease in injuries so far this season compared to what we would expect on average. But if you actually keep scrolling, it tells you about injury risk is high injury to low condition, and then it gives you sort of advice on how to sort it out. So it does actually tell me at the moment, we should be looking at adjusting our tactics to be less intensive. And to be fair, I've just finished the game, so there could be a bit of that as well. But when I now go into my tactics, I go out of possession, I put the trigger press all the way down, I go back to that exact same message, and now the message has changed again. So he is aware of what's going on around the club. So now it's giving me the same sort of message, but it's saying we should look into giving some rest days to the players as well. So right now, it's not really good advice for me because I've just finished the game. So that could be a reason why players have low condition. But if you're just approaching the game and you're checking your medical center, maybe actually taking some of the advice that your head of sports science is telling you. Maybe you do need to decrease the intensity in your tactic, or it might just be the case of giving one or two players just a rest day. Just give them a rest. It's what the head of sports scientist is saying, who has a very good a very good rating of sports scientists on 18.
Just a quick one, just while this episode's on. I hope you're enjoying it, by the way. And if you are enjoying it, please consider hitting that like button. That'd be much appreciated. It shows us who's enjoying the episodes. And also, while you're there, why not consider hitting the subscribe button as well? You'll find out exactly when all the new episodes drop, so you'll never miss a beat. That, of course, pushes us up through the YouTube algorithm. It gets us in front of more eyes. And, of course, the more the podcast grows, the better it's going to be. There's also a little space for a comment, so leave us a comment. We love reading them, and we will, of course, get back to you as well. And speaking about getting back, let's get back to the episode. And it's conclusive proof that it's all interlinked. And we know it's all interlinked when you see it in black and white in front of you. It's just like, oh, of course, yeah. Like, if I'm pushing the players hard in training and I'm pushing them hard in a match, of course they're going to tire. And like, we mentioned it on the last episode, and Aaron, you did have the question of what are the players resting? Do you look to rest? Do you look to recovery? Because again, those are going to be different things that could sort of affect those sort of players in terms of once the match is over. Because normally, when the match is over, I'll have match review and recovery as my instant default in my head. That's what I want to do. I want to give them a bit of bit of a sort of active recovery session. Just stretch yourselves out, a bit of swimming or whatever. Like nothing too strenuous, but I could even be better off just going, you know what, lads, have the day off, couldn't I?
Yeah.
So the game actually tells you sort of recovery. Sorry, Steve. Recovery, it tells you the impacts that a recovery session has. So match review, there's no rest. Your players aren't gaining anything back from condition wise. So I'm guessing it will just be at the same level. But then when they do the recovery, then the injury risk is greatly reduced, the fatigue is reduced, condition slightly increased, and the happiness is increased as well. But remember that's very important. Condition is only slightly increased. Now, if you compare that to rest day actually just is a bright green increased, or dark green, I should say. So there's more increase on condition by resting them over having recovery. What you do lose when resting players, you lose team cohesion, which makes sense, and you greatly reduce sharpness. So again, it's risk and reward. Is it the sharpness or is it the condition that you're trying to solve in your team? If it's condition, then you would want to have recovery sessions. But if it's actually sharpness, then make sure, again, you have recovery session, or you should rest players. But if you haven't sharpness, if your players don't have great sharpness, then I wouldn't actually advise to rest, because that isn't going to help.
And also, to your point, Aaron, in terms of like that intensity thing, like sometimes, like if you're gegenpressing, it's physically intense. That's just part of it. So you're listening to your medical center and going, we can't change the tactic. I'm very sorry, but what we will do is manage the minutes of the players there as the kind of compromise, right? Which I think is interesting. One final, slightly more niche but interesting point before we go get some rest ourselves. I want to say is, going back to the medical center, you've got your season summary at the top as well. And that's interesting because if you click on percentage of the season missed so far, it's a good way of collating a player who, someone goes out 4 or 5 months, big odd injury. That's an obvious absence. But I'm looking at this now, for example. And so Mohamed Kudus was my biggest injury. I mentioned that 5 weeks with ligament damage. However, Destiny Udogie, who's my backup left back, has missed. So Kudus missed 15% of the season so far due to that big injury. Udogie has missed more, 18%, 6 weeks in total. And when I actually go in to look at him, it's all a bunch of a tight hamstring here or there.
Little niggly injuries that are just cumulative.
Exactly. So pulled calf muscle, twisted ankle, bruised foot, etc. Nothing. No recurring injuries. He's just clearly that sort of player. And so that's worth bearing in mind when it comes to signing a player, for example, as well, or how much you can or can't rely on them. And therefore, the playing time that you can promise them. Because I don't know, this might just be me and how the game makes you feel rather than being fact, or how the game the mechanics of it work. So you go, you can see that. And it's a bit more difficult, I suppose, before you sign a player. But certainly when you have a player, you can now see their injury history and get the sense that they're, I'm going to miss Destiny Udogie for about a fifth of the season. If he's going to be a starter for me, that's just not really workable. And I can't rely on him. So if you go to playing time on your players, I've given him squad player. And part of that is because I can't rely on him. So if you suddenly, and if you have a guy who's an important player or a regular starter, but they're injury prone, and they're not playing enough games to be happy, but it's because they're injured, it's like, well, you need to drop down to being a squad player because we can't rely on you physically being there. Which I thought is just an interesting kind of way that all again tessellates in terms of thinking about building your squad.
It is very interesting, but as you know, Steve, players don't think like us. They think that even though they're out injured for all of the season, they should be the absolute star player. How could you possibly survive without them, despite the fact you have? So that is interesting. Very, very interesting. Okay. Do, of course, let us know if any of that has helped with yourselves in your saves with regards to fatigue, match sharpness, any ideas you've got that we haven't covered. Obviously, feel free to comment below. Let us know. Get in touch, of course, in all the ways you know how. Speaking of people who have been in touch throughout the course of the last few weeks, we are delving into the mailbag and we're going to have a look here. Archie, who is, of course, one of our Patreons, has sent us a message in Discord, which is a rather lengthy one, but he's got basically just listened to episodes 3 and 4, getting caught up there. So appreciate you, Archie, for catching up. With regards to transfers, this is, of course, all the way back in our transfer episode. They've said it's always a good idea to keep an eye on clauses, especially with regards to selling players. So again, that's something that we didn't touch upon. They, of course, can help, as he says here, depending on club size, they could give you a welcome cash injection. That old percentage of profit or percentage of after sale can absolutely come in. Injection, there you go.
That's literally where it came from. Yeah.
Aaron, the RDF tactic injection. Twitch.tv/RDF tactics.
Also, sorry, so if you want a team that has actually decent clauses at the beginning, Southampton. I think this is where you can cash in on Virgil van Dijk, Sadio Mane. There's a lot of players that you can cash in. And I was Southampton. Also, the budget is at 10 million at the start. By the time I finished with this page, it was like, we're looking around 30, 40 million pounds for me to spend. It's a very, very nice little page, that.
Well, Liverpool take a massive chunk of their budget gone by paying for Southampton players twice.
Sorry, Liverpool. Sorry.
There you go. They spent the money. That's what happens. So yes, keep your eye out on those clauses. They're pretty decent. They then go and say about when taking over a new club, they're saying about generating cash flow. Philosophically, as we've pronounced it, in an outtake. If you've not seen that on Twitter, by the way, check it out. Philosophy-wise, again, that was another episode we looked at. Archie says he has one stipulation, and this got my blood going. I loved it. One stipulation, which has been present in all of my saves, tactics, and teams, and it is the instruction to get stuck in. It has to be switched on at all times. They are from an era that I would love, the agricultural era of football. So get themselves in there. Make sure that everyone is racking up those yellow and red cards. It seems as he smashed the championship disciplinary record on the way back to the Premier League. So there you go. You live by it, don't you? You've got to have it. That's the way. Aggression all the way. Determination. Love that. They also have signed a 6'4" Italian captain, Steve. So there you go, and he tells the press we wouldn't go out to injure anyone, which is a blatant lie because it says he does. So yeah, that's a good one. So yeah, do make us do of course get in touch if you have got any specific philosophies that you will use within your teams.
Yes, and we also have one from Discord as well, JSB0110. Thank you for messaging in. I'm in need of a Roman playmaker for my Olden save. I'm now in League 1, back-to-back promotions, but struggling to find anyone in the lower leagues to play that position. What attribute traits should I be looking at? Now,
binoculars to try and find a Roman playmaker in League 1.
What I would say is with these sort of things, it's stop. I don't want to say that you are, but other people, stop looking for someone that's absolutely fantastic because it's all relative to your league. So what I'm trying to get at, you don't need a Roman playmaker with passing 16, vision 16, decision 16 in League 1. Maybe, okay, passing you might want around a respectable level, but when it comes to vision, decision making, it's completely fine to have it at around 11, 12 because that is around the average that your league will be performing at attribute-wise. But with a Roman playmaker, for me, they're more of a box-to-box midfielder, but someone that likes to dictate tempo. So they should be good physically, and they should also be all right creatively-wise. Good trait for me, dictates tempo or tries killables often.
What could be quite fun with that as well is trying to find a kind of player who was great in the Premier League a few years ago, but has lost their legs a little bit with technical quality. The one that comes to mind is Wes Hoolahan, who had a lovely couple of seasons at Cambridge United near the end of his career. And just because he had that technical ability, it meant that, I think he played a bit further forward, but that could be a way of using your roaming, searching for a roaming playmaker, setting your age profile, setting your technical level, and the stats that Aaron just mentioned quite high, and see who comes up.
I think, Aaron, you touched a point there that basing your attributes league specific and look for the averages. You can a way you can do this. Again, I'm not sure how many people know how to do this. Some people do, some people don't. But if you go to the preferences on your game and you go to skin, which is actually on the vanilla skin of the game itself, if you type skin into the search bar, then you can change the colors of your attributes. So I think by default, like something like 15 is maybe set to green, and that's like a positive. You can obviously scale that down individually. So your high attribute you can scale back down to for League One. Say you can scale it to 13, could be your high attribute. You could then put your mid range to like a 10, and then your low range to an 8 or something. And then that just gives you a better view of those players, because by default the game is showing you what these players are like in the world of football. But of course, as we know, everything is relative to your situation, so you can change it that way. So hopefully that works for you. Let us know, JSB, if it has worked.
Next up, we've got Rob Latham, who was, I believe, from memory, introduced us to the Colombian structure of football.
Yes.
And I've taken it out of my mind.
The league where you can win the league without winning the league.
Exactly. But he starts his latest message like this: "Forgive me, Father. I must confess my sins." It's another confessional, everyone.
It's a confession.
Let's go.
Another FM confessional. So, Rob recently started to save with Real Sociedad, having a lovely time, challenging for the top spots, competing with Madrid and Barca in La Liga. However, at the end of season 4, I was courted, tempted, you might say, by PSG and offered their vacant manager role. So obviously, the appeal of PSG is the sort of the endless riches, and you've already got incredible players there. And the notion in your head, I think we all have this with PSG, it's like, I have to be vaguely competent and I can just win it all, because the amount of wealth is just there, and you can just poach whatever best players you want. I understand the appeal, my son. Okay. However, Rob saved the game at this point, went to bed to mull it over. A very wise decision, because he sensed the temptation, was like, no, I will not walk into the valley of death or whatever, biblical stuff. The next day, I came back and foolishly accepted the offer from PSG, and I immediately felt dirty. So he knew it was wrong as soon as he'd done it. As soon as he did it. After a few weeks, I'd managed to sell off their expensive dross, but the pure filth overwhelmed me. This is quite a graphic, very, very descriptive. Sorry. So, Rob took the route of temptation, felt the regret almost instantly within weeks. So, Rob reverted to the save file from before he accepted PSG's offer. Oh, shake of the hip and Tony. Okay. No. It's not quite save scumming, but it is related, isn't it?
It's time traveling, Steve.
He says it himself. He says it himself.
Okay. I wholly apologise for my sins in joining PSG and then subsequently technically saving and reloading. Technically save scumming here. But having continued life with Sociedad and enforcing a self-scrub down in a cold shower, I'm happy to report that I now feel fully clean. Well, a couple of things here. We'll be the judge of whether you're fully clean here, Rob. You can't just, it's a bit like coming to the confessional and being like, oh, Father, I've said 25 Hail Marys, so it's fine, right? It's like, no.
Soz. Yeah.
Yeah. It's sort of coming in and be like, by the way, did this sin, done my penance, have a lovely day. I was going to let you off there, Rob. I was going to let you off. But you can't come to the confessional with your own sin preordained, okay? Because I didn't, I've had this comes up a lot in the conversations around. We were talking about it in a recent conversation in the last episode around saves, right? You sort of know in the back of your mind that actually I like this save. The lure of a big team is not going to be the same. So I was going to have some sympathy in terms of like, do you know what? You tried it and actually went back to that. I in Rob's shoes, I think I would possibly do the same. If I left Fiorentina for the bright lights of a PSG, for example, I would probably, and again instinctively have the sort of previous save file and be like, just in case.
Oh,
so there is sympathy. There is sympathy. However,
you see what we're working with here. This is
sympathy with a sinner does not mean forgiving a sinner.
Yes,
especially one who tries to absolve themselves and give their own penance, as discussed. Although also cold shower does sound very unpleasant. So
it's good for recovery, though. So.
Good for recovery. Good for recovery. But what I'd also say, Rob, is you've done it for nothing. So, okay. There is going to have to be a punishment. And it is going to have to sting. And it's going to have to come from selling off players, I think. Question is, how harsh do we go? Do we say best player at Sociedad offered to PSG? We'll give you transfer, we'll give you their, current market value. So
no, he benefits from that though, because he can go and replace. Surely, if you sell your best player to PSG, you then bank the money and you can replace.
It depends. It's difficult without seeing their saving. It depends because there's some players that I'm attached to who I just wouldn't want to sell. But I feel irreplaceable.
But there are ways that you can do it. You can have them on a massive contract. You agree the sale with the star player to say, look, if 100 million comes in for you, we'll say yes. But no, and they agree to that, then you're protected because a lot of the time it doesn't happen, and it does. You've got 100 million. So what I'd say is no contract extensions, current value, not trying to inflate the value at all of your best player, and that's rated by stars, has to be offered to PSG.
But what if PSG don't take it? Because my thinking, and Aaron, just while Steve cogitates on this one, my thinking would be, he's left Sociedad, right? He's been lured to PSG, okay? Rather than reloading the save, for want of a better phrase, right? He could have just resigned from PSG, took the honourable route out, admitted that he'd made a mistake, and said, "You know what? I shouldn't be here," and resigned, and been one of life's short managerial histories. Yeah. So my thinking is he should resign from Sociedad, and then go to wherever he goes next.
Could be back.
That would be my thinking.
Could be back.
Because he's gone back to Sociedad, so let's take him back out of the equation. Right. You left to go to PSG. You didn't like PSG, but you were tempted by the bright lights. So you know what? You've been tempted. No more Sociedad for you. Aaron, am I being too harsh?
I think so. I think so. I just no one's not on the back of my head.
Time travel.
I want to really know though why he left PSG. Is it because he did feel dirty because of the riches, or was he under pressure to win? And that's what sort of did he run away from the expectations, or was it okay? I feel dirty with having all this money, because he didn't tell us how long he was actually at PSG. Oh, after a few weeks, I managed to sell off. So he went there because of the money, and then decided to get even more money, and then just thought, you know what, I've had enough.
So
a part of me feels that he ran away from winning. There's a part of me, because a lot of people say, I'm not going to do PSG, it's too easy. But have you tried, and is it actually too easy?
So do you think he wasn't winning straight away? He saw what he believes is the expensive dross.
I mean, the results are not part of the message. The results are not
with what we've got in terms of the message. I feel that
I think I'm more
proportionate here, because it's a 4-season save. But at this point, you're committed. I don't really want to take that off, Rob, but there does have to be, as you say, Tony, you can't just time travel without consequences. But no, didn't like that. I'm just going to try and erase that difficult thing I didn't, because we all have to live with the consequences of all the decisions that we make, right? You can't just reset it in real life. And I get this is about escapism. I get that. That's the whole point of playing a game like this. But there should be a memory and a mark. So I am inclined to still say, if it's not PSG, that best player has to go. And if that's a question of like forcing them out the door, That's the mark that this decision leaves.
Leaving Ross, what's that is so harsh.
So basically, okay, no, here we go. So next transfer window, Rob, if that's January or summer, whichever one, your best player has to go. Doesn't matter how that happens, has to go. Doesn't matter how financially damaging it is to you. Doesn't matter the ructions it causes in the dressing room. That's your penance. Thank you for visiting the FN Confessional.
There you go. Let us know how you get on, Rob. And of course, if anyone else has any sins they wish to confess to Father Steve, then of course, feel free to bring those confessions to the altar, pew?
Confessional.
Confessional. Of course, yeah, it's in the name, isn't it? If you want to bring it to any part of the delivery area of the space, that'd be great. Just leave it by the door. We'll pick it up. If you want to bring those in, then of course do bring those in via the fmshowpod@gmail.com. Question we've got again on Discord. Rob1878 has asked, "Hi Tony, RDF, and Steve. Do you plan to have any guests on future episodes the way you did on the previous incarnation of the show? Keep up the good work." Rob, I think the short answer for this is yes, we do plan to have guests on as we keep going. Obviously, feel free to comment below who you'd like us to approach, and we'll see what we can do. So, yeah.
I'm just laughing because imagine it's just me turning up as a guest, and the guest this week is...
We're struggling to get a guest, so Aaron says he will turn up on the podcast again.
I love as well, it's only taken 7 episodes before people have fed up with us already. That's good.
I also love the fact that Aaron's demoted himself from co-host to guest. Trying to just pop on just for half an hour.
Because when you
show. I
said,
don't want to be here for the whole day.
I could just imagine someone just doing that on Twitter. Twitter X.
Anyway, to Tony's point as well, in terms of guests on, tell us also in the various ways you can get in touch with us via email or various social media channels. What specifically you want to hear from? Because then that helps us decide which guests to have on and that sort of thing. Whether it's the best people from Sports Interactive or whether it's someone from the wider FM community. Let us know specific parts of the game that you want to talk about, and maybe that's because that informs the guests as well.
Exactly. And of course, you can do that, Steve, Aaron, by contacting us on Twitter/X, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, comment on YouTube, or in the Discord. And of course, remember, you can send us an email, thefmshowpod@gmail.com. And that is the best way to get in touch. And that was episode 7 of the FM show, hosted by myself, Tony Jameson. My co-host is Aaron Falloon, aka RDF Tactics. Our producer is producer Steve Hankey. Take care, stay safe. We'll see you all next time.